Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what is my question about? I work in corporate environment, and in this environment we have basically two different types of communication. The first type is official indirect communication, like mail or, for example, GitHub notes or something like this. And the second type of communication is direct informal communication, like usual phone calls, meetings, and so on. For some reason, people, my colleagues and people from other teams prefer the second type of communication. For some reason, I don't know why. Personally, I prefer first type because when, for example, I write email, I have a time for thinking, I can attach some additional materials, and when I answer on the email, I have a time for thinking again. So first time it's much more efficient for me. But for some reason, people prefer direct calls, direct chats, and prefer to make meetings to discuss something. So the first my question is how to make our enterprise style communication more efficient, and how to enforce people to use the first type of communication. It's kind of my main first question. And the second and smaller question is how to make meetings more efficient if I cannot avoid participation in it. Because very often when I take part in such meetings, meetings don't have agenda, they are too long, and from my point of view, it's very often waste of time. So it's kind of 1.5 questions from my side.
Yeah, I got it. I have it. I have it in many projects. It's almost the same story all the time because there's managers and programmers as well. They're just used to face-to-face communicating. They used to exchange information in an informal way, and that's the easiest way for them. This is the cheapest way, and this is the most chaotic, which is for many people, especially for not so senior programmers, not so good managers, is the best way to deal with information because it's difficult to trace it back. It's difficult to understand who said what. It's difficult to actually find out who was in charge of that decision, who made the mistake. So it's kind of easier to work in that kind of environment where you cannot really say who was the originator of this data, where did it start, and so forth. So the only way so when you try to communicate more formally by email or in GitHub or in some kind of writing, then you have to understand that first of all, you're kind of bringing more discipline to these people, and you're disturbing them because you're making their life, you're making them scared about their future because they used to work in a less disciplined environment, and they're safe. They're getting their salaries, they stay in their workplaces, they're not fired, so they're in a safe spot, so they don't feel threat from anywhere. And then you're coming in and you're saying that from now on, we're gonna exchange information through email because you want that not for fun, you want that for traceability. First of all, you want that emails or GitHub or whatever because this is more discipline, means more traceability first of all for you, so you can search back, you can find who said what, you can organize information better,
and also, for example, who did wrong decision in the past, for example.
Exactly. And you also want to minimize the amount of time that people will spend on talking. Because if you send it once, you put it on electronic form, you put this decision somewhere, and then they don't need to talk again and again about the same stuff. They can just get back to GitHub and find that information there. So you're making their life more, you put them in danger. Because from now on, they need to spend this time somewhere else. They need to do something else. They need to keep themselves busy in order to get, in order to be paid. So they cannot pretend to be working anymore because you're bringing more discipline, you're structuring them, and eventually some of them will be fired because of you. So you're kind of threatening them. And you're doing it for good, not for your...
Yes, sure.
You're doing it for good because you want the project to be organized better. It's clear. So my decision always, like what I do all the time in that case is that, well, first of all, you understand that this is bad for them. Just get used to that. Just get used to the aggression and resistance which will come from these people. It's inevitable. It will happen. So the only way to deal with that, as far as I understand, is to make this new way of communicating more profitable for them, more
and safe.
Gives them some advantage in that. So, for example, they come to you and say, "Can you explain me this and this?" And you say, like, "Yeah, sure. I have like 1 minute for that. Like, let me briefly explain it to you." And then you send a more detailed email. So they will realize that when you talk to them, you're not really open, you don't say too much, you're being kind of closed, you don't have time for that. You're always trying to push back. But at the same time, you're really like ready to disclose as much as you can by email. So every time they come to you with a question, you always push back and say, "Hey, I wrote about that somewhere else. So here's the document. I sent it to you by email. Let me send the document to you. Let me email you back." So they will always see that you're trying to not just push them back and say, "Hey, don't talk to me, email." Because in that case, they will see you as an aggressive way of enforcing discipline, which is going to be not pleasant for them, and they will fight back. So instead, just give them some benefit and say, "Hey, in a face-to-face communicating, you will get that piece of information from me. But by email, I can send 3 times more." Something like that. That's the only way. If you're not a manager, if you're not the boss of all the bosses, if you're on top of the hierarchy, then of course you can just say, "Do it my way," like communicate through GitHub or communicate through emails, and I prohibit any meetings, just close the meeting room and the keys in your pocket. That's it. If you're the manager. But I don't think you're the top manager, so the question is coming, you're somewhere in the middle of the hierarchy, so you need to know what to do. So my best advice is that you just think, how can you make that way of communicating for them better? Like give them some carrot. You already have the stick in your hands because you're threatening them already. You're really a threat for them. They're really afraid of you because you're bringing discipline. Nobody likes discipline, especially bad managers, not good programmers, unprofessional engineers, all that people, they don't like discipline. And there's the majority. Usually it's the majority, like 90% of people will be against the discipline. So if you want really to enforce the discipline, you need to give them something back to fool them sort of, so they will believe you that, okay, there's something coming together with this discipline, something good is coming. For example, he's always sending way more like details over email instead of talking. So that's kind of the answer for the first question. The second question was how can you make your meetings more productive and spend less time on them and organize them better? Again, the same story. People love to be in meetings, especially people who don't know what to do else in the office. So they need to collect their paychecks. They need to pretend that they're working. They need to spend their time somehow in the office, right? So they just, they're getting some salaries for doing like spending 1 hour a week for doing something productive. And the rest of the time they're just talking. But, we can't just fire them tomorrow. And if you tell them that stop making that meetings, again, they will be against you, first of all. So the best way to make meetings more, productive is to bring some structure to the meetings. So don't just close them. Don't just say that we're not going to talk anymore, but try to organize them somehow. So bring some, agenda, make some minutes after, make some notes, distribute that notes. So slowly make sure that people see see the purpose of that meeting somehow, and they must understand that there's a better alternative somewhere. So instead of going again and again to the meetings, they must realize that there is somewhere some GitHub account where there's some file which has all the answers, and that file created by that guy, and I just need to find that file, and in that file we can see all the answers, and the best programmers already know where the file is, and the best programmers, they don't want to go to meetings because every time they call the meeting, they will say like, "Hey, we have the file, we have already the list of decisions already been made, we already discussed that." And then these people who try to organize meetings, they will kind of be stuck, and they will see that there's no point of calling more and more meetings because somehow, somewhere, somebody already resolved that outside of meetings. So you can't just close meetings. You can't make them more productive. You can make them less frequent because, like I said, people need them, people want them, people love them because they help them to look busy.
Yes, and probably it's an easy way to communicate. It's a kind of natural way to to talk, not to write.
Of course, yeah. That's for, like I said many times, for a bad programmer, for a bad manager, the meeting is the best tool. Because of course it's easier to talk than to write. It's way more difficult to create a proper document instead of explaining what I think, in person. Like now, you're calling me because it's easier for you, even though I wrote a number of articles about that, but it's easier for you to call and we talk for 5 minutes. So if we would be doing that, the same.
But basically, it's an example of a bad way of communication.
It's a counter example, exactly, because I wrote the articles about the questions you're asking, but it's easier for you to call and we just spend 10 minutes and I give you all the answers. But we're doing it on purpose because, this is easier for readers and for people who are watching us now. But in the office, we should avoid that because the way we talk, it should be written first. So that's the answer. So give them the alternative. Don't just close meetings and say, hey, I'm against the meetings. I'm just I like the discipline.
Basically, I had the idea just to avoid participation in the meetings without proper defined agenda. Just avoid it. But probably it's not polite. It's not polite. It's aggressive and.
It's really aggressive. Yeah, you will just see people fighting back to you. So you have to offer them alternative, and they will see that the alternative works, and then they will just make less and less meetings. Without that, they will be just making meetings and telling everybody that this guy in particular is just an introvert. He just doesn't like to be with meetings. He doesn't like us. Let's just fire him, and the problem is solved. And then eventually, you will be the scapegoat. So don't do that. Offer the alternative first. So that's it.
Okay, makes sense. Okay. I will try to think in this direction. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.